Confidence is dangerous when it makes you forget how quickly things can go wrong. Most people don't crash because they're reckless. They crash because they trust their skills a little too much, because they've done something 1,000 times and believe the 1,001st will be no different. That's how ordinary moments turn into disasters. And that's exactly what happened to Paul Walker and Roger Rodas, two car enthusiasts who had spent years around powerful machines, and to Peter Van Hull, an aerobatic pilot who knew the sky better than most people know their own neighborhoods. People who were experienced, talented, and absolutely certain they were safe, right up until the moment they weren't. On the afternoon of November 30th, 2013, Santa Clarita felt like any other peaceful California weekend. Families were strolling through a charity car show organized to raise money for victims of Typhoon Haiyan. Among the people walking through the event was Paul Walker, an actor beloved for his role in Fast and Furious, but more importantly, someone who was a genuine car enthusiast long before he was ever famous for it. Paul wasn't planning anything extraordinary that day. He had simply stopped by to support the fundraiser and spend some time with friends. One of those friends was Roger Rodas, a man Paul trusted completely, not just as a business partner, but as a skilled, responsible driver with decades of experience under his belt. They decided to take a short break from the event and go for a quick drive. No racing, no stunts, nothing reckless. Just two friends stepping into a Porsche Carrera GT for what should have been an ordinary loop around the block. But the Carrera GT was not an ordinary car. It was the kind of machine that demanded constant respect, a vehicle built for racetracks, raw in power and notoriously difficult, even for experts to tame. Still, both men had spent years around fast cars. Speed for them wasn't a thrill as much as it was a language, something they understood deeply, and that familiarity made everything feel safe. As they pulled out, the engine roared, a sound that made people turn their heads, not out of fear, but out of admiration. Witnesses later described the tone of the engine echoing between the buildings, a sound that felt normal for a car like that. But as the Porsche approached a sweeping curve, the confidence that usually kept experienced drivers calm became a quiet trap. Police later estimated the speed at anywhere between 80 and 93 miles per hour, speeds that the men had handled before, but speeds that left absolutely no margin for error on a public street. When the tires lost traction, the moment was almost invisible, a slip so quick and small that neither man had time to make sense of it. The car spun, veering off the road, striking a tree with devastating force before bursting into flames. Paul Walker and Roger Rodas died within moments. The world mourned Paul, the actor, the philanthropist, the friend. But behind the headlines was a sobering truth. Two men who deeply understood cars and deeply respected speed had been undone by a machine that allowed no forgiveness, and by a confidence built over years of experience. Experts later concluded that the crash wasn't about reckless behavior. It wasn't about arrogance or thrill-seeking. It was a tiny misjudgment multiplied by horsepower and trust. A moment where familiarity made danger invisible until it was too late. Because sometimes confidence doesn't feel dangerous until it becomes irreversible. 6 years earlier, and thousands of miles away, another tragedy unfolded, not on a road, but in the sky. Peter Van Hulle was no stranger to risk. He was an experienced Belgian pilot, one of the skilled competitors in the Red Bull Air Race, a sport known for its razor-thin margins and breathtaking maneuvers. These pilots skim through giant pylons at extreme speeds, performing turns and dips that require absolute precision. Peter had mastered these movements countless times. Years of training had turned them into muscle memory. Crowds admired him. Other pilots respected him. His confidence was not only earned, it was necessary to compete at that level. On November 18, 2007, during a training session in Perth, Peter began a sequence he had performed many times before. The sky was clear. The conditions were ideal. Nothing seemed unusual. But that's the nature of overconfidence at high skill levels. Danger doesn't look dangerous. It looks like routine. As Peter banked his plane into a tight, steep turn, he held the maneuver just a fraction longer than the aircraft could sustain. A fraction, less than the blink of an eye. The plane stalled. Spectators watched in stunned silence as the aircraft dipped sharply, losing lift, descending too quickly for recovery. It struck the water with immense force, killing Peter instantly. Investigators found no engine malfunction, no mechanical failure, only a tiny miscalculation in a familiar maneuver, executed by someone who knew that maneuver better than almost anyone alive. Because mastery can sometimes blur into comfort, and comfort, when paired with danger, can be fatal. Peter's death shook the aviation community, not because he was careless, but because he was experienced. And experience can make even the most dangerous moments feel controlled until suddenly they aren't. Paul Walker and Roger Rodas, Peter Van Hole, three men who respected danger, three men with years of experience, three men trusted by those around them. None of them were reckless. None of them were unskilled. None of them believed that what they were doing that day was unsafe. And that is exactly why their stories matter. Because confidence, even justified, earned, well-deserved confidence, can soften our sense of risk. It makes us trust the familiar too easily. It makes us forget how quickly things can change. It makes the world feel safer than it is. So let these stories stay with you, not to frighten you, but to remind you that every familiar road, every ordinary turn, every skill you think you've mastered still deserves your respect. Because when confidence turns into danger, the cost is always far greater than anyone expects.